Good morning, day 39. Whoop whoop. Oh man, I don't know what to say this morning. Honestly, I've really struggled. There's so much. I started the book of Judges this morning, and there's a lot there. I'm like, God help me, literally. So y'all are gonna kind of learn along with me, because there were so many thoughts that I had that I think God is going to use in my life personally, that I'm like, I don't know where to start. So as I was just going, you know what, you got to do something, because you've committed to doing this little sunrise thing, and you gotta come up with something. So here we are. That is my all-in commitment to doing this little shindig here for myself. And sometimes you've just got to go and just do it anyway, even if it doesn't all make sense in your head. Not that it ever makes sense in my head. There's a lot going on in there, as y'all have seen. But what principle, what thread to pull out? Because there's, again, just so much. I think we're in for another bumpy ride with Judges. The people were brought into the promised land, and I think they must have said to themselves, because Joshua dies, and there's no one person that replaces him, and they still have some land left to conquer, and they don't quite make it. So you kind of makes you wonder if they kind of went, this is good enough, right? This is like the theme of my life. It's good enough. It's good enough. Why try harder? Why knock yourself out? Isn't it just good enough? Oh man, that is like my struggle in a nutshell. And then of course I get overwhelmed, because there's this part of me that knows that I need to do more, should do more, want to do more. But I'm like, oh, is it really worth the effort to, be that 1% better, to, do the thing? Isn't it just good enough? And you know what? Good enough gets you into a lot of trouble by the time you're 50. Oh, in my case, a few extra pounds around the middle, you know what I'm saying? And a wine habit that I'm like, it's good enough. What's a couple glasses of wine gonna hurt? Because I was stuck in my day-to-day comfort, and also being ruled by the day-to-day overwhelm, and not really taking the time to think about the bigger picture of where all this stuff was leading me. It's like all the culmination of everything we've talked about for the last 38 days, and even that I've been kind of battling with personally the last 4 to 5 years, and slowly coming out of that mindset of, is it good enough? Is it good enough? There's a big difference between something being mostly done and all done. That makes me think of another Princess Bride quote. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead, as we learn with Wesley, those of y'all are Princess Bride fans. But there is, and as a coach now, and actually having conquered kind of a few of my own promised land and come out of the wilderness in just a couple of instances, this was been kind of my struggle the last year. Isn't this good enough, God? I'm good. I'm good with this. Maybe I'll just put up with the few extra pounds and the other bad habits. Isn't this good enough? See, I told you God was working on me, and I was resisting him, because I was like, I don't want to talk about that. And here it just comes out. I'm a verbal processor, so I need to do this. And there was a message in there that I was resisting, because I was like, but it's good enough. It's good enough. And that's what the Israelites, at the beginning of Judges. Joshua's gone. They've lost their leader. They look around. They're like, well, we've got most of the land. Isn't this good enough? And they go in and kind of, it sounds like they kind of half-heartedly, and maybe they weren't really relying on God to conquer the rest of the lands of Canaan. And they were like, well, there's not that many of them. We'll just make some of them slaves and we'll live with some of them and it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's good enough. Good enough. But was it? No. A little sin and a lot of sin at the end of the day is still sin. What do us parents like to say about disobedience? Delayed obedience is disobedience. Something like that. I don't know. I am the good enough parent. I'm gonna call myself out right here. Sure, cereal for dinner, good enough. And that has gotten our family, even our marriage, into a little bit of trouble. And now, because I'm married to the opposite, he's like, only perfection is good enough. And here I am going, it's good enough. And he's really had to, anyway, there's enough of a peacemaker in him that he's like, fine, I'll just go over here and just do this. And we're not going to have that fight. Oh, man. Okay, God. Y'all are getting to know the real me. But here I am. I am committed to this. It's not good enough. Like, there is that part of me that I'm like, well, what if I miss one day? Even my mom, who is the same as me, she was like, why do you have to do that every day? Wouldn't just 4 or 5 days be good enough? I'm like, no. Now, just because got 100% commitment to this, for this year doesn't mean I got it going on in the other areas of my life. That's that we humans are only human. We can only do what we can do. And we've got to fight one battle at a time. Just like we've been learning through the Bible so far up until now. Like, there's only so much we can do. We've got to ask God for help. We've got to have rest. We've got to settle down. We've got to know that we've got complacency. We've got to work on these issues. The territory, as we learned, through metaphor and concepts, represents us, our body. And it had to be kind of done one territory at a time. But there was an absolute instruction and covenant made with God that you must get rid of everything. That way you won't have temptation. You're not going to go worship other gods. But they didn't listen. They got to the edge, saw that they were like, it's good enough. And it wasn't. And then God said, well, I'm going to let these people be a thorn in your side. That sounds like a familiar verse. Like, don't we hear Paul say that in the New Testament? And maybe, that's intentional. Like, the story's not done yet. I haven't showed y'all the sunrise yet. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful. Kentucky frosty morning sunrise. It is, I think it's like 13 or 14 degrees. It's cold. So I've got a daughter who needs to get up and go to school. So back home, back to reality. But this was a lot for me to think about this morning personally. And I gotta tell you, I'm not real happy with God right now. No, I'm just kidding. I am. It's just a good reminder because, and I think I started to say something and I didn't finish a thought, and that's something I'm working on. But in the coaching world, and when you really want to conquer something, there is a big difference. That 1% difference between 99% and 100% is everything. You can't commit to something 99% and think that you're going to have success. But you can be fooled by it and think, oh, yeah, I got this. And if you leave that 1%, open in your mind and your heart, then you're not going to have lasting success. But temporary success may fool you. And you think, it's good enough. It's good enough. I got this. I don't need to go all in. And I'm telling you, you do. God's telling us. He tells us over and over, and we don't get it out our skulls. Because it's hard, because we've got a lot of competing things in our lives, and I think Judges is going to unpack that a bit too, or a lot. And so you've got to have sort of a guiding principle. And that's also the other thing that we see very clearly from the first words of Judges. They don't have that. They don't have Moses. They don't have their Joshua. Now they're going to get some smaller versions of that, but it's not quite the same. And I think that's intentional. And we see this theme of, isn't this good enough? We've mostly done it. Can you imagine if, anyway, I think that's enough for today. I'm kind of rambling. This is obviously something that's just coming out even as I'm speaking, so there's a lot to unpack and process there. Maybe we'll have a whole week of this concept of that we struggle with, of things being good enough, and then wondering why we're struggling. All right, love you, my friends. Thanks for joining me on this morning sunrise, rise and shine together adventure. And I will see you tomorrow for day 40. All right.